During a panel discussion in Atlanta, Ms. Abrams said this about a baby's heartbeat, a fetal heartbeat, the heartbeat of a baby in a mother's womb. This is what Ms. Abrams said about a fetal heartbeat. She said it is, quote, a manufactured sound. A manufactured sound designed to convince people that men have the right to take control of a woman's body, end quote. My word, her words, not mine. In May of 2022, during a Georgia gubernatorial debate, she's running for governor of Georgia now. Ms. Abrams called Georgia, quote, the worst state in the country to live in. In October of 2022, during another Georgia gubernatorial debate, Ms. Abrams accused the sheriffs, all of the sheriffs in Georgia who endorsed her opponent, Governor Brian Kemp, of wanting, quote, to be able to take black people off the streets. In October of 2022, Ms. Abrams appeared on MSNBC. She suggested that abortion is a solution to inflation. Here's what she said. She said, quote, let's be clear. Having children is why you're worried about your price of gas. It's why you're worried about how much food costs, close quote. Her words, not mine. Let me say again, Ms. Abrams has the right to her opinion. This is America. You're not free if you can't express yourself. But I do think any fair-minded person would have to conclude that Ms. Abrams is controversial. So,
can this help fade away dark spots?
Dr. Gundry, can age spots be removed? Absolutely. Age spots are not actually caused by aging per se.
And our body heat, which combines that sugar and protein in a chemical reaction that's called the Maillard reaction. So we can actually reduce that process and fade these dark spots. In fact, many of my patients are shocked when their dark spots disappear. I was amazed when my dark spots on my hands disappeared by following my protocol. And people look at my hands, they say, oh my gosh, look at your hands.
I have more sunspots than you. What are your tricks?
The lining of your gut is your skin turned inside out, so that what happens on the lining of your gut is reflected in your skin. So if you have a healthy gut lining that's glowing, you'll actually see that on your skin. And if this banana could actually get rid of them, there wouldn't be thousands of people struggling with unwanted discoloration, just like my wife Penny did. For years, she beat herself up over these pesky spots and how much older she thought they might make her look. She tried all the tricks out there. I hated seeing her self-confidence suffer, which is why I made it my personal mission to find a solution. So I dug into the research, and what I found absolutely shocked me. Here we were trying to find.
In March of 2023, not that long ago, Ms. Abrams went to work for an organization, a nonprofit, called Rewiring America. You've probably seen that name in the news. Rewiring America. Ms. Abrams' title, she went to work for Rewiring America. Her title was Senior Counsel. She was paid for her work for Rewiring America. We don't know how much, though there'll probably be an investigation to find out. Now, nonprofits like Rewiring America, Ms. Abrams' group, they have to file documents with the IRS. And one of the documents they have to file is called Form 990. This form by the IRS asks a number of questions about nonprofits. One of the questions the IRS asks is where it is for the organization, the nonprofit, to list its accomplishments. Rewiring America, Ms. Abrams' group,
told the IRS in 2023 on this form 990 that Rewiring America was, quote, this was Rewiring America's, quote, startup year for the organization. And the form goes on to say that the only accomplishment Rewiring America listed was that it had, quote, joined a coalition of other national organizations to apply for a grant from the Inflation Reduction Act's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. In other words, Ms. Abrams' organization told the IRS that this filing was their first ever tax filing in 2023, that the organization was a startup, and its purpose was exclusively to seek a grant from President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. Fair enough. So what do we know about this coalition that Ms. Abrams' group wanted to form? Rewiring America, Ms. Abrams' group, announced on October 12, 2023, that it was joining Habitat for Humanity, it was joining United Way Worldwide, and 2 other organizations. And these 4 organizations were going to form another nonprofit, a coalition of nonprofits called Power Forward Communities. So you've got Power Forward Communities up here, you've got Rewiring America, and some other organizations down here. And all together, they make up Power Forward Communities. And they also announced that a gentleman by the name of Tim Mayopoulos, a former Obama administration appointee, would lead the coalition. Now, as a nonprofit, I told you that Rewiring America had to file forms with the IRS. Well, so did this new group, Power Forward. It had to file Form 990 as well with the IRS. According to its filings, Power Forward had just $100 in total revenues in 2023. According to the IRS filing, it didn't list a single accomplishment. I've seen Girl Scout troops with more business credentials. Yet Power Forward Communities, of which Ms. Abrams' Rewiring America was a part, had the audacity to ask the federal government for a $2 billion grant. For what, you ask? It was supposed to be for, quote, to expand access to clean energy by prioritizing housing, equity, and resilience. Power Forward Community said it wanted to take this taxpayer money and help people install energy-efficient upgrades to their homes. What are we talking about? Heat pumps. Get rid of gas stoves. Now, it's good to dream big in America. I'm all for that. But under any reasonable standard, Mr. President, under any reasonable standard, one is entitled to ask how these organizations, Ms. Abrams' Rewiring America and Power Forward Communities, brand new organizations, no business experience, $100 in the bank, are qualified to receive $2 billion of taxpayer money from the Biden administration.
Chuck Norris, the best commercial of the year.
Chuck and I were both around in the 70s.
Yeah.
People just looked healthier back then. If you look at a photo of people at the beach in the 1970s and you compare it to today, the difference is shocking.
So what happened?
In 1974, Kellogg's came up with the ad campaign. Breakfast is the most important meal ever. And then we ate more because we didn't feel full. Fast forward to today, and it's no surprise we look like this.
So you're in amazing shape. What's your secret?
Well, my husband's discovered something that's been a game changer. He still works on our ranch, and he rides horses, he plays with the grandkids, he even hits the punching bag. We feel healthy and strong, all because we do this one simple routine.
I believe in always being prepared for the unexpected. That could mean a natural disaster or even a threat to your loved ones. But what if the unexpected danger wasn't something outside your door, but inside your own body? Achy joints, digestive issues, weight gain, and fatigue. We're told these are normal signs of aging, but in my experience, it could mean something much worse. I call them the 3 internal enemies, and they are wrecking the health of millions of Americans right now. Most of them don't even know it. But the good news is, if you know what they are, there's a way to field stars of the last 50 years. I also served in the United States Air Force, and I'm a world champion black belt. The things I value most in life are my faith, my family, and my country. But there's one more really important thing we don't talk about enough, our health. And as we get older, it becomes more and more of a problem. After age 30, our metabolism changes. We have less energy and we gain weight easier, especially around the hips and belly. After age 40, muscles start to decline. Our bodies feel weaker. And for most people, it gets worse every year. Simple things like hikes and sports get harder and harder. After 50, collagen breaks down and our joints start to ache. It gets tough to play with kids and grandkids, or sometimes even lift household objects or open a jar. We lose mental energy. Brain fog becomes normal, and inside our bodies, even our digestion slows down. That can lead to issues like bloating, fatigue, and even unhealthy food cravings. If you've dealt with any of these things, you're not alone. And if we don't support our bodies, these problems just get worse and worse. But a few years ago, my wife Gina and I decided to do something about it. We began researching every way we could to turn back the clock and help people feel great again. I tried everything. Some things worked a little, others did nothing at all. But a few things not only worked, they literally transformed my health. And what I've learned is that anybody can achieve great health regardless of their age. Today, I'm 81 years old, and I look and feel better than I have in years. My digestion is now fantastic. My body is lean, and my muscles and joints feel strong and healthy. I've got the energy I need to run around with family, do chores around the ranch, and socialize with friends till late in the evening. Most important of all, my body just feels good. How'd I do it? In the end, the solution was actually really simple. There were 3 internal enemies attacking my health.
Now, that didn't stop the Biden administration from cutting a check, though. They took our money and gave power-forward communities in Rewiring America $2 billion. You want to know how we ran up $36 billion in debt? That's how. Now, the EPA announced in 2024 under President Biden, just 6 months after Power Forward was formed. Power Forward was formed, and 6 months later, President Biden and his team announced they were giving them $2 billion, and that's, as I said, that's B with a billion. Now, look, I try to see the world from other people's bell towers as much as I can, but I cannot come up, not for the life of me, with a single rational justification as to why the EPA under the Biden administration thought it was appropriate to give Power Forward and Rewiring America to brand new business, or brand new nonprofits with no business experience, no accomplishments according to the IRS forms, and only $100 in the bank to give them $2 billion of taxpayer money, especially to the exclusion of every other qualified applicant for that money, if there were any other qualified applicants. We don't know. I don't know. I don't know if there was a competitive bid. Now, I do know that the EPA, under President Biden, gave Ms. Abrams' group, her 2 groups, $2 billion cash. In the grant approval, President Biden's EPA said that Power Forward had to allocate this money to get rid of stoves and to put in heat pumps. They had to allocate the money. They had to spend it in 21 days. Now, that meant that Ms. Abrams' group, Rewiring America, which was part of the larger group, likely received or was supposed to receive a check for $490 million, about a quarter of the total $2 billion, by the end of May 2024. And the other organizations, within 21 days, President Biden directed, were also supposed to receive their share of the money. But get this. President Biden and his team directed these NGOs to distribute $2 billion in 21 days. But the Biden administration also told Power Forward within 90 days to go take a course. You know what the course was? The name of the course was How to Develop a Budget. How to develop a budget. So, President Biden gave Power Forward 21 days to spend the money, but said, you've got 90 days to go take a course about how to put together a budget.
And why would anybody in the Milky Way give $2 billion of taxpayer money to two organizations that had just been formed, that according to the IRS filings had no accomplishments, and one of them only had $100 in the bank?
If you're a New York homeowner, then you could qualify to receive $19,400 to stop paying your electric bill. The federal government has officially extended the solar investment credit, which gives homeowners thousands of dollars when they upgrade their homes with solar panels. Not only was it extended, but the average rebate is now over $12,000. Plus, the state of New York will pay another $5,000 on top of that. And if you live in an active zip code, there's another rebate that can be as high as $10,000. Just imagine getting over $20,000 towards your future electricity bills. That's essentially what this program could do for you. If you want to find out exactly how much you can get paid to go solar, just click on the button below and take our 60-second Go Solar quiz. You don't have to put any money down. You just redirect money that you already spend on electricity and put it towards owning the equipment that produces your own power. The reason you see so many people doing this is because your solar payment could be 30 to 60% less than your current electric bill. And unlike your electric bill, that payment will never increase. So to find out how much you can save each month, just click below and YouTube will open a new window for you to take our 60-second quiz. And once you're finished, you'll be brought back to the same video that you came here to watch. These incentives might have been extended, but material costs and interest rates will continue to rise. So you'll save more money by starting this process now. It's totally free to see if you qualify, and there's no cost up front to go solar. You'll just replace your electric bill with a much cheaper payment to own your solar panels, saving you thousands of dollars over time. Don't let yourself waste another dollar buying expensive power when you can pay less to own your energy. Click below and start saving.
5 words you pronounce wrong 2 years before your brain starts shutting down. Dementia is now becoming a new epidemic, according to the Mayo Clinic, where doctors have made a shocking discovery that changes everything we know about memory loss and mental decline. I'm not sure if this might interest you, but if you or a loved one is often forgetting things or suffering from brain fog, then I've got something important to share with you. So, about a year ago, my husband came home from his doctor's appointment, and he had this note that totally knocked me down. It said, "Your husband is showing signs of dementia." So it turned out, after a lot of tests, my husband's brain was all clogged up. It had plaques, really scary to be honest. And this can happen to so many of us. It was literally suffocating his brain. That's why he was experiencing forgetfulness. He was tripping up on his...
I think I know why. I certainly know what it looks like. I mean, this would be comical if it wasn't so odious. $2 billion. You know, the last 4 years under the last administration have been very difficult for America. The cost of everything's gone up. The cost of many things have gone up by 20%, and our wages didn't keep up. The average electricity bill in America went up 19%. The average Louisianian, because of President Biden's inflation, had to spend an extra $890 a month, extra, for food and clothing and car notes, and they didn't get $890 a month raise. President Biden and my Democratic colleagues told us that the Inflation Reduction Act, I remember when it was passed, they said if you spend $1.2 trillion on the Inflation Reduction Act, it'll be a lifeline to every family in America. It's not what it looks like to me. It's starting to look like to me that it was really a slush fund. A slush fund for Washington insiders. Now, I don't want to make accusations that are unfair. I think EPA Administrator Zeldin
needs to get to the bottom of this. I believe in fairness. I believe in due process. Mr. Zeldin has announced that he's going to try to claw back as much of this $2 billion and other monies as he can. And again, I think he ought to do it fairly and accord everybody due process. But you know what? If the shoe fits, wear it, Cinderella. Here's what I see. I see two organizations formed in the last year or so of President Biden's administration. On their IRS filings, they say we have no experience, we have no accomplishments. One of them only has $100 in the bank. One of them, senior counsel, is Ms. Stacey Abrams, a well-known Democratic politician. I see them asking the President of the United States and his EPA for $2 billion cash to fight gas stoves and getting it to the exclusion of every other applicant who might have been able to use that money. Now, this is just the beginning of the type of spending porn that President Trump and Mr. Musk are uncovering, that people are screaming about. I'm going to repeat what I started with. There's nothing wrong with wanting to know what they do and did with our money. And that's all President Trump and Mr. Musk are doing. Mr. President.
A performance that truly matters. Get tickets now at shenyun.com. Before communism, China had a glorious past. What if you could bring it back? Since 2006, Shenyun has been reviving the essence of Chinese civilization, deeply rooted in ancient values like compassion, honesty, and faith. Yet decades of destruction, deceit, and violence have nearly destroyed a nation's values, along with its own identity. So how do you revive what has been lost in today's China? At the core of Shenyun is an ancient art form, classical Chinese dance. Classical Chinese dance, movement begins with the heart. This characteristic makes classical Chinese dance richly expressive and unparalleled in storytelling. Shenyun's original music blends East and West, and we preserve traditional techniques throughout our production. Our artists follow the principles of truth, compassion, and tolerance. This brings a greater depth to our art. Every year, Shenyun premieres a completely new production with new stories, new costumes, new music, and new choreography. This undertaking is only possible with the devotion of each and every artist, for in our hearts is a mission greater than us all. Join us to reclaim the beauty, wisdom, humor, and drama of 5,000 years.
Ring, make it, ring, girl, make it.
Apartment 2B?
2B! She's definitely using that Grubhub deal from Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
Amazon Prime member, you can get $0 delivery fees on Grubhub. Eligible orders only. Terms and additional fees apply.
Mr. President.
Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with me today are two of my colleagues from my Senate office, Mr. John Lowry and Mr. Jackson Bewley. I am grateful for their good judgment, counsel, and advice. I am delighted, Mr. President, to see so many members of Congress, and I mean this sincerely, so many members of Congress embrace the call for a less wasteful federal government, for a more efficient federal government. We spend a little over $6 trillion a year, as Senator Sanders so eloquently pointed out. When you spend $6 trillion a year, somebody's getting $6 trillion a year. Every penny in our budget has a constituency, and that constituency will fight us. They will fight us. And I recognize that, and it's something that as we go about downsizing government, we have to be mindful of. However, there is one constituency that is not going to be able to fight us in our quest to scrutinize federal spending, and I'm referring to dead people. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about dead people and the fact that they're getting money from the federal government. In fiscal year 2023 alone, this is just 1 year, our government sent $1.3 billion, not $1.3 million. We sent $1.3 billion in checks to dead people. Those aren't my numbers. Those numbers come from the Office of Management and Budget. That's just 1 year. Not only is the federal government sending checks to dead people, those checks are being cashed. Now, I have heard, Mr. President, of dead people voting, but cashing the checks? You don't have to be God's perfect idiot to realize that there's fraud happening with respect to all this money. Here's how this problem arises. When you die in America, your name is sent to the Vital Records Office in your state. And an ongoing list of deceased Americans in that state. So far, so good. The Social Security Administration takes this data, this list of deceased people, and they compile on an ongoing basis a list called the Death Master File. The Death Master File. That's just a list of everybody, updated daily, of people in the United States who are deceased. Why does the Social Security Administration do this? Well, so the SSA, Social Security Administration, can stop sending people who have died checks. So far, so good. There's just one problem. I discovered this about 7 years ago. The Social Security Administration
refuses to share that list with anybody else in the federal government. They won't share it with any other federal agencies, many of which send out checks. The Department of Treasury, for example, sends out checks. SSA won't share the information with them. The Small Business Administration sends out a lot of checks. The Social Security Administration has a list of all deceased Americans, but SSA will not share that information with the SBA. I'll give you some examples. You remember, Mr. President, when we were in the coronavirus crisis, so we had an economic meltdown. We sent stimulus checks to Americans to try to keep the economy on its feet. We paid $1.4 billion to dead people, and they cashed the checks. The Paycheck Protection Program, which was a part of our stimulus program, paid out $38 million alone to dead people. These were people who were using, my people obviously, who were using dead people's Social Security numbers to collect payments. The COVID-19 Economic Disaster Injury Disaster Loan Fund, another culprit, was involved in sending checks to dead people. The Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'm not blaming them, in many respects it's not their fault. A couple of years ago, a scam artist stole the Social Security number of a deceased veteran, and received about $825,000 in checks from 1997 to 2024. Now, the person committing this fraud was just quietly accepting the checks. Somehow the Department of Veterans Affairs, and for some reason, stopped sending that person the checks. So the fraudster just picked up the phone and called the Department of Veterans Affairs. He impersonated the dead person and convinced them to start sending the checks again. Again, not necessarily the fault of the Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA didn't know that the Social Security number belonged to a deceased person. Another example, a person in Ohio was able to collect her deceased mother's Veterans Affairs benefits for 48 years. 48 years before she was caught. The truth is, Mr. President, it's sort of like saying, being asked, you didn't go fishing on Saturday. How many fish do you think you didn't catch? We don't know how much money we're sending out every year to dead people. Let me give you an example of how screwed up the data is, Mr. President. This is a strong indicator of what's wrong. The Social Security Administration, if you ask them, will tell you that there are, according to their records, there are 6.5 million Americans living today in America who are 112 years of age or older. They say there are 6.5 million Americans who are at least 112 years old or older. Now, I don't know about you, Mr. President, but I don't know anybody who's 112 years old. And I checked, at any given time, there are about 40 people on an ongoing basis in the world who are fortunate enough to live to be 112. But the data is so screwed up that according to SSA, 6.5 million people are 112 years old. A number of years ago, 7 years ago, I started working with Senator Tom Carper, a fine American if there ever was one. I started working with Tom on this issue. I went to Social Security, and I said, look, this problem is easily solved. Just share the death master file with other agencies, and especially share it with the Department of Treasury. I don't want to confuse anyone, but the Department of Treasury has a do not pay list of people who aren't supposed to receive checks for a variety of reasons that other agencies consult. But I said to my friends at Social Security, why don't you just give the death master file to other agencies? They said, we can't. It's illegal. The way we construe our enabling statutes, we don't have the authority. Well, I said, okay, I'm not going to argue with them. We'll just go pass a law. It was harder than I thought, but we did. In 2020, Senator Carpenter and I passed a bill. The bill was called Stopping Improper Payments to Deceased People Act. And it gave the Social Security Administration permission, and indeed directed the Social Security Administration to start sharing its list of dead people with other agencies in the federal government. I don't want to get down in the weeds, but believe it or not, we had people oppose the legislation, and many people within the federal government. So in order to get our bill passed, we had to compromise. We had to agree to only implement this requirement that Social Security share the list of dead people with everybody else. We could only get them to agree to do it for 3 years for a trial program. This clock started ticking on our 3-year period in December of 2023. So obviously, 3 years is right upon us, and if we don't make this program permanent, it's going to expire in 2026. So Senator Carpenter and I have introduced another bill. It does basically the same thing as the 2020 bill, but it makes the program permanent. This new bill is called Ending Improper Payments to Deceased People Act. And we need to pass it. There's been a lot of squabbling back and forth. I don't want to do anything to step on too many toes to jeopardize my bill, but about how much the states are going to be paid and who's going to pay Social Security for sharing their dead persons list with the rest of the government. I think we have a lot of it worked out, but we need to go past this bill. I mean, this makes no sense whatsoever. I can understand if we talk about changing the Medicaid program, for example. What's fair, what's unfair. I can understand debating that, and I can understand reasonable people disagreeing over what changes, if any, we ought to make to the Medicaid program. I get it. I just listened to Senator Sanders once again speak very eloquently about the waste at the Department of Defense. That's something that reasonable people, all of whom agree that we ought to have a strong defense, but reasonable people can disagree over how to achieve that. But my God, you don't have to be Euclid to figure out that this is just fraud. It's abuse. It's low-hanging fruit, and it's so easily solved. All we have to do is direct the Social Security Administration on a permanent basis, not a three-year trial basis, on a permanent basis, to start sharing the list of dead people with the Department of Treasury and everybody else in federal government who wants it. And then everybody's on the same page, and we know who's deceased, and we can stop sending the money to dead people who cash the checks. Now, I'm talking about this now, Mr. President. I've talked about it
before on the floor. I'm not going to try to pass the bill this year. I'm not. We're running up against the clock, and we have the NDAA. We have a CR to pass, and we've got to keep government open. We've got to renew the flood insurance program, and you know all that, Mr. President. But I'm going to be back. I'm like the Terminator. I will be back as soon as the new Congress is sworn in. Many of my colleagues have said to me, you know, it's time we stop talking about who needs to pay more in taxes and start talking about and asking the question with respect to what the hell happened to the money. And I agree with them. I can't think of an easier place to start. Let's just pass this simple bill. Let's stop sending money to dead people. Again, we can debate about the wisdom of dead people voting. We all know what happens. But cashing checks, that's a bridge too far. Thank you, Mr. President, for your time and attention. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President, last week, President Biden, I wish him well, gave his farewell address to America. He said a number of things, but one in particular got my attention. He warned America about, quote, his words, not mine, quote, a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of very few ultra-wealthy people. President Biden went on to say, and I quote again, today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead, end quote. Now, I don't know who President Biden was talking about. But I know one particular circumstance about which I'm going to speak that fits his warning. Again, I don't know if the circumstance I'm about to describe is what President Biden meant, but if the shoe fits, wear it, Cinderella. We cut to the chase. Mr. George Soros is an oligarch. He's one of the wealthiest people in the world. He's a friend of President Biden's. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, President Biden just gave him, I think, the highest civilian honor that a president can give to a civilian, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Mr. George Soros is buying WWL AM radio in New Orleans. Let me say that again. That may not mean much to you, Mr. President, but it means a lot to my people in Louisiana. Mr. George Soros is buying WWL AM radio in New Orleans. WWL AM radio is practically an institution in my state. It's been around since 1922. 1922. Over 100 years. It's a clear channel. It's what the communications experts call a clear channel Class A station. Its transmitter power output is about 50,000 watts. That's a lot, folks. That's the maximum for commercial AM stations in the United States. It's the lead station on the New Orleans Saints radio network. It's an important station. And Mr. George Soros is buying it. Now, what does that mean, and how did this happen? WWL is owned by a national company called Odyssey. A-U-D-A-C-Y, Odyssey. Odyssey has about 220 radio stations nationwide, one of which, of course, is WWL. Second largest radio network in America. It reaches, I think, 45 different markets throughout our country, Mr. President. 165 million Americans. It's huge. Odyssey borrowed too much money. They took on too much debt. They took on about $1.9 billion worth of debt, and they couldn't service that debt with their revenues. So what did they do? They did what many other corporations do when they can't service their debt. They went into what's called Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Not Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is when they liquidate the company. Chapter 11 bankruptcy is when a company goes into bankruptcy in front of a bankruptcy judge and says, Judge, we want to get all of our creditors and debtors together and restructure our cash flow and our debt so we can come out of this bankruptcy a surviving entity. They went into Chapter 11 with a bankruptcy plan. Mr. George Soros immediately pounced. He, of that $1.9 billion in debt, he bought about $415 million of it, cash on the barrelhead, paid 50 cents on the dollar. One of the tenets of the reorganization was that all the current shareholders would be wiped out. The new creditors would assume equity positions in the company. I know that sounds complicated, and it can be, but really what it means is that the bondholders, one of which is Mr. Soros after he bought the $415 million worth of debt, became a shareholder. And Mr. Soros is now the largest single shareholder in Odyssey radio stations, including WWL AM in New Orleans, an institution. Now, in America, you can't just go do this. Why is that? Because those airwaves on which WWL and the other radio stations broadcast, they don't belong to the radio stations. They belong to you, and you, and you, and you. These airwaves, the spectrum, if you will, they're owned by the American people. And years ago, we created the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. We set it up to be in charge of the airwaves that belong to the American people, to make sure that those airwaves were being used prudently by radio stations. For example, if a radio station is bought by a bunch of foreign nationals or foreign entities, the FCC has got to approve it. For example, anytime a broadcast license, as is the case with Odyssey, is transferred, the FCC has to approve it. So Mr. Soros's purchase of WWL radio and the 219 other radio stations had to go before the FCC. And it did. And it went, the approval for Mr. Soros went through the FCC like green grass through a goose. And it was a party line vote. It was last September. All three Democrats, there are 5 people on the FCC, all 3 Democrats said, let it go. And they short-circuited the normal process. Now, I'm not an FCC expert, And I'm not a communications law expert, but I've read, this has been widely reported, and I've read about it in many reports. Normally, on a deal of this size, when 220 radio stations are being transferred, their licenses, using airways that belong to the American people, and there's a substantial percentage of foreign owners, it would take about a year to get through the FCC. FCC would do a complete investigation. Not this time, no. This time was special. What happened was what some members of the media have called the Soros shortcut. They just got together and rammed it through. Did I mention it was like green grass through a goose? 3-2. Now, the two Republicans on the commission, they're screaming the whole time, whoa, Nellie, whoa, whoa. Why aren't we taking this seriously? Why aren't we investigating this? Why aren't we doing our due diligence? They were outvoted, 3-2. You know, when even in a democracy, when you've got the votes, you can make a porcupine like hot peppers if you've got the votes. It doesn't make it right. A number of people petitioned the FCC and said, please don't do this. One of the groups that petitioned the FCC was a group called Media Research Center. The FCC, 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans, dismissed them. But this is what the Media Research Center said. Quote, their words, not mine. There is no question that George Soros and his affiliated businesses are looking to control these radio stations to advance their particular brand of activism, close quote. And the MRC urged the FCC not to create, quote, a special Soros shortcut, quote, that would circumvent their rules and allow the deal to move forward. It did it anyway. Here's what Mr. Troy A. Miller, NRB president and CEO, said. He said, quote, my words, or his words, not mine, quote, the fact that the FCC is apparently willing to bypass the usual protocols, that means the normal procedures, to get this transaction done just weeks before a presidential election and right after the President of the United States gave Mr. Soros the Presidential Medal of Freedom, seriously undermines the Commission's credibility and raises unwarranted questions of whether administrative processes are being manipulated to exert political interference and preference, end quote. Here's what one of the Republican members of the FCC in dissent said, quote, Commissioner Brendan Carr, who's soon to be chairman of the FCC, now that there's a new sheriff in town. Here's what Mr. Carr said. The Commission's decision today, approving Mr. Soros's plan, is unprecedented. Never before has the Commission voted to approve the transfer of a broadcast license, let alone the transfer of broadcast licenses for over 200 radio stations across more than 40 markets without following the requirements and procedures codified in federal law. Pass me the sick bucket. This isn't right. But they did it. Now, this is America. You're entitled to believe what you want. If it's legal, you're entitled to do what you want.
And Mr. Soros is certainly entitled to his opinion. He is. I don't agree with him, but he is certainly entitled to it in America. I'm not much into this cancel culture, and hopefully we've seen the end of it. But when you're acquiring radio licenses which can influence public opinion, and you're doing it in part, not exclusively, but in part with foreign money, well, that's why we have the SEC.
But I want to make this clear. I believe in free speech and free expression. You're not free if you can't say what you think. You're not free if you can't express yourself. And Mr. Soros has that right. But here's where he stands. I want my people in Louisiana to know who's buying WWL radio in New Orleans. Mr. Soros is a billionaire. God bless him. He made his money himself. He has poured much of his wealth into what, in my opinion, are radical causes. He's now working with his son, who I understand is a very smart young man. His name is Alex Soros. Mr. George Soros and Mr. Alex Soros hold some, how should I put this, non-mainstream American beliefs. For example, Mr. George Soros has called the United States, quote, the main obstacle to a stable and just world. Mr. Soros believes that our country is, quote, the main obstacle to a stable and just world. Not China, not Iran, not North Korea, the United States of America. Pass me the sick bucket. Mr. Soros has also said that China has, quote, his words, not mine, China has a, quote, better functioning government than the United States of America. Mr. Soros does not believe that the United States should have secure borders. He once called national borders a, quote, obstacle, end quote, to his plan for widespread immigrant resettlement. Mr. Soros and his family, as you probably know, have spent millions and millions of dollars to elect prosecutors throughout America who believe that violent criminals are the real victims. These prosecutors believe, for the most part, that if a cop has to shoot a criminal, it's always the cop's fault, but if a criminal shoots a cop, it's always the gun's fault. These prosecutors that Mr. Soros has backed with millions of dollars all believe that if you are concerned about crime, you're automatically a racist. Mr. Soros and his son Alex have called for, Alex in particular, have called for softer sentences on violent criminals. This is what he has said. I'm quoting his words, not mine. But if we are serious, Mr. Alex Soros said, but if we are serious about ending mass incarceration, we must also rethink our response to crimes that are more serious, including violent ones. Even those who have been victims of violence increasingly do not believe in long-term prison sentences. In short, Mr. Soros, both George and Alex, believe that America would be better off if we had open borders. They believe that if America would be better off, in my opinion, this is how I read their writings, if we ended jails and if we ran our government like the Communist Party of China. I don't agree with that. But Mr. Soros, both of them are entitled to their opinion.
But my people in Louisiana are entitled to know whose opinion they're hearing on the radio. And this has not been reported once in Louisiana. Let me say it again. Mr. George Soros, through a expedited procedure, I'm trying to be even-handed here, who received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Biden, and who is close to President Biden and all of my Democratic colleagues, on a 3-2 vote at the FCC, has been able to buy over 200 radio stations throughout America, including WWL Radio. And I want my people to know about it. And I want to make sure that it was done legally. I'm not saying it wasn't done legally. I am saying that it looks funny. Not funny, ha-ha. It looks weird the way this was done. It has the aroma of politics. And I hope the new FCC revisits this issue. These licenses and these airwaves do not belong to me or the FCC or to Odyssey or to WWL. They belong to you and you and you, the American people. And we're supposed to make sure through our FCC, that's why God created the FCC, that these licenses are not just given to anybody. I've been in the Senate for 8 years. In dog years, that's 56 years. And it feels like 56 years. I've learned a lot, met a lot of interesting people. Before I got here, everybody told me about the Washington bubble. And I said, how serious could they be? Well, it's true. There is a Washington bubble. This place is different. It's in its own way, sometimes disappointing, sometimes refreshing. It is deeply weird. For one thing, common sense is illegal in Washington. It's illegal. For another thing, I've discovered that this is a town of very frustrated ex-class presidents. And there's a Washington way of doing things. And when things aren't done that way, when somebody challenges the status quo, many, not all, but many of these frustrated ex-class presidents in Washington, on the Hill and otherwise, they get excited, not in a good way. They can't get their mind around doing anything other than the Washington way. Some of them, particularly in the media, they go almost catatonic, or the exact opposite. They foam at the mouth. And they really get upset. They can make a Valium nervous. It's like the world, we're not doing things the way we've always done them, and the world's going to spin off its axis. I want to try to put in perspective what many of my Democratic friends have been talking about today. They're very, very, very upset at President Trump. And they're very, very, very upset at Elon Musk. President Trump ran for president on a number of issues. One of the issues he ran on, he said it almost every day. He said, if you elect me president, I'm going to go through the entire budget and review all the spending, line by line. If I heard him say that once, I heard him say it 1,000 times. And that's what he's been doing. He went out and appointed, through an executive order, Elon Musk, who some people like him, some don't, but he's not a dummy. He's a very successful business person. He's got a top secret security clearance. President Trump issued an executive order, and he turned to Mr. Musk, and he said, Mr. Musk, I want you to do for me what I said I was going to do in the election. I want you to go through all the spending, line by line. Now, let me ask you something, Mr. President. How are you going to review the spending without reviewing the spending? How are you going to audit the spending by an agency without auditing the agency? That's what I mean when I say common sense is illegal in Washington, D.C. That's what Mr. Musk is doing. He's put together a crackerjack team, and they're going through everybody's spending line by line, item by item. And my Democratic colleagues are very, very, very upset. And they've been very eloquent. They've talked about the process, and President Trump's executive order supposedly violates the Constitution. And they've accused Mr. Musk of having conflicts of interest. And so I've heard people say he's sitting over there with a notepad, copying down everybody's Social Security number, and he's going to go use it to make money. I mean, people in this town, not just my Democratic colleagues, they're really upset. They've never had anybody question their spending. But that's what Mr. Musk is doing. But you know what? I've listened. This has been going on for a week. People have been screaming like they're part of a prison riot. Oh my God, look at what Musk is doing. He's looking at the spending. And I've listened to people talk about the process and debate whether it's constitutional and discuss how many lawyers can dance on the head of a pin. But you know what? I haven't heard one single person who's upset with President Trump or Mr. Musk talk about what he's found. They don't want to talk about the spending porn, the waste of taxpayer money that he's found. I mean, that's the point of all this. I tell you who is interested. The American people. The people in America who get up every day and go to work and obey the law and pay their taxes and try to educate their kids and try to do the right thing by their kids and try to save a little money for retirement, and have had to live through 20% inflation under President Biden. They understand what Musk is doing. They understand spending porn and wasting taxpayer money. Now, Mr. Musk started with the USAID. That handles a lot of foreign aid for America. American people are very generous. In our country, you know, when you're homeless, we'll house you. When you're hungry, we'll feed you. In our country, when you're too poor to be sick, we'll pay for your doctor. And we send a lot of money overseas to help our world's neighbors. And the USAID is in charge, in large part, of that. But I'll tell you what Mr. Musk discovered. I find it fascinating. He discovered that the American taxpayers are giving money to Afghanistan. He found that we are giving money to Yemen. He found that we are giving money to Syria. I didn't know that. Some of our foreign aid is going to Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria. He found that the USAID has 10,000 people, 10,000 people, employees. And every year they give away $40 billion. Mr. Musk also found, and I'm not saying that all of this money is wasteful. I'm not. Some of this money, I'm sure, does some good. That's why Secretary Rubio is going to revamp the department to separate the good from the bad. But this is the kind of stuff Mr. Musk found. He found that the USAID gave money to support electric vehicles in Vietnam. Our money, taxpayer money. He found that USAID gave money to a transgender clinic in India. I didn't know that. I bet you the American people didn't know that. He found that the USAID gave $1.5 million to a Serbian LGBTQ group called Grupa Izladaji. I probably mispronounced that, my apologies. Anyway, they got $1.5 million to, quote, advance diversity, equity, inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and business communities. What else did Mr. Musk found that my colleagues don't want to talk about? Well, he reviewed a study and then went and checked it. The study was done by the Middle East Forum. They found that USAID spent $164 million to support radical organizations around the world. We're not talking Cub Scout troops here. We're talking about radical organizations around the world. They gave $122 million of that to groups aligned with foreign terrorist organizations. Our taxpayer money. According to this report in Mr. Musk, the USAID has given millions of dollars to, quote, organizations in Gaza controlled by Hamas. Why aren't my colleagues talking about that? Recipients of the money, they found, have, quote, called for their lands to be cleansed from the impurity of Jews. That's what we're giving foreign aid to. What else? I'm not going to spend my whole time talking about this, but nobody else is talking about it. They're just talking about the process, and Mr. Musk, and he's a mean guy, and he shouldn't be looking at our spending. Well, he is. And I kind of find what he's found out interesting. He found that we gave $2 million, USAID did, for sex changes in Guatemala. He found that we gave $20 million to produce a new Sesame Street show in Iraq. He found that we gave $4.5 million of taxpayer money to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan. He found that we gave $10 million, USAID did, of meals to an al-Qaeda-linked terrorist group called the Nusra Front. Mr. Musk found that we gave $7.9 million of taxpayer money to a project that would teach Sri Lankan journalists to avoid binary gendered language. The USAID took $8 million and gave it to a bunch of journalists in Sri Lanka to teach them how to avoid binary gendered language. I don't know what the hell binary gendered language is. I think I do. You think most taxpayers would support that? Why are we talking about that? The USAID gave $1.5 million to promote LGBT advocacy in Jamaica. They gave $1.5 million to rebuild the Cuban media ecosystem. They gave $1.5 million for, quote, art for inclusion of people with disabilities in Belarus. Another $3.9 million for LGBT causes in Macedonia. $8.3 million for equity and inclusion education in Nepal. I could go all night. And many of my colleagues are upset. They're really mad at Mr. Musk. Hell, I think we ought to give him a medal. All he's doing is what President Trump said he was going to do. President Trump said he's going to audit the spending. So Trump goes and hires Musk, again with the top secret security clearance. Nobody can quibble with his intelligence. You know, the guy's as smart as Einstein's cousin. He's a very successful businessman. Some say he's the richest guy in the world. And he's doing the auditing. And man, he's finding a lot of stuff. I call it spending porn. Now, I'm not saying everything that USAID does is wasted, but I'm saying a lot of it is. A hell of a lot of it is. And we ought to be on the floor of this United States Senate thanking Mr. Musk. And we ought to be asking him to go through every agency and look at everybody's budget. Everybody's budget. That's what the American people want. They don't want to talk about process. They don't want to continue with the Washington way. They want to save some money. Now, let me tell you what's really going on here, too, Mr. President. For 4 years under President Biden, and for, 8 years under President Obama, and I respect both of them. I don't hate anybody. I don't. When I say my prayers at night, one of the things I ask God, God, don't let me hate, because it's hard in Washington. Don't let me hate. I have all the respect in the world for President Biden and President Obama. Tough job. But between them, they spent 12 years in Washington, and presidents set the tone. They control the questions that are asked. And here's the question that President Obama and President Biden asked for 8 years. I heard it for 12 years. I heard it every single day. Who needs to pay more in taxes? Is it you? Is it you? Who needs to pay more in taxes? We need more money. Who needs to pony up more? That was the issue. But that's not the issue today. We have a new president. You know what the issue is today? What the hell happened to all the money? What the hell happened to all the money? And that's what Mr. Musk is finding out. That's all this is about. And I'm just shocked that my colleagues have decided that this is a hill they're going to die on. How can you look the American people in the eye and support this kind of waste? Support this kind of spending porn? I mean, the election to me made at least one thing clear, that the American people are sick and tired of people in Washington denying reality. The last administration tried to convince us that we were living in a crime-free world where inflation was temporary and the border was secure. And the American people didn't buy it. You know why? Because it wasn't true. And the administration, our last administration, tried to argue that Bidenomics was making our lives better. But the American people knew differently. President, with me today is Mr. John Lowry, who's one of my colleagues from my office. who's been a big help to me. Mr. President, as you know, when Vice President Harris and President Trump ran against each other for the presidency, one of the planks in President Trump's platform was that he was going to review every penny of federal government spending. Why did he say that? Why did he promise to do that? Well, first, there's a moral principle involved. People worked hard for their money, and when they give it to government, they're entitled to expect government to spend it efficiently. Number two, President Trump ran on that plank because of our debt. The federal debt is $36.5 trillion. You know, we throw these numbers around like a trillion, you know, we start to take them for granted. To give you a little perspective, this $36.5 trillion, it grows bigger by the second. It's going to increase. If we just keep doing what we've been doing, it's going to increase $1 trillion every 100 days. If we just keep doing what we've been doing, it's going to increase $10 billion a day. Today, nothing changed. We added $10 billion in debt. That's also $417 million an hour. That's $6.9 million a minute. I think I've been talking about a minute. We just added $7 million to our debt. That's why the president wants to get rid of spending porn. The reaction here in Washington, Mr. President, has been breathtaking. I understand Washington is not exactly a slice of America. I get that. I understand that Washington is not normal. Normal in Washington, D.C. is a setting on the dryer. So I get all that. We're different in Washington. But the pushback to President Trump's effort through Mr. Musk and his team to reduce spending has just been extraordinary. I mean, people are barking and yelping and shrieking about it. They sound like the game room in a mental hospital. And I get that a lot of people don't like President Trump, and I get that many people don't like Mr. Musk, and I get that Mr. Musk is different. I kind of like that. I mean, I like different. You know, he's the sort of guy that would wear, I don't know, he'd wear Crocs to a wedding. I get that. I find it kind of refreshing. But nobody's ever called him a dummy. And he's found an incredible amount of waste and abuse of taxpayer money, what I call spending porn. I'm not going to repeat everything I repeated or I said the first time we talked about this, but Mr. President, it seems to me to be once again extraordinary that people are mad at President Trump and Mr. Musk for the process they're using, but no, they're not mad about the money being wasted. I mean, Mr. Musk, whether you like him or not, he's found, for example, $7.9 million we spent to teach Sri Lankan journalists to avoid binary gendered language. He's found money that was given to an NGO to empower the LGBT community in Armenia. He found $1.5 million that we spent to rebuild the Cuban media ecosystem. $2.1 million to the BBC to strengthen the media ecosystem in Libya. $8.3 million spent for equity and inclusion education in Nepal. Does no one care about how the money was actually abused and wasted? Mr. President, it's not unusual for me to be disappointed for some things I see in Washington. And under the last administration, I have to admit I was disappointed just about every single day. I'd almost gotten used to it. But last week, and this is what I want to talk about, Mr. President, I read a story. It was a story about the abuse of taxpayer money in the last administration. And it was so nauseating that it triggered my gag reflex. In April of 2024, not that long ago, the EPA under President Biden gave $2 billion in taxpayer money to an organization that had absolutely no experience, that was backed by a very prominent Democratic politician by the name of Ms. Stacey Abrams. Here's what happened. In 2022, as you know, Mr. President, President Biden and my Democratic colleagues passed the Inflation Reduction Act. Not a single Republican voted for it, not one, either in the House or the Senate. We knew at the time that spending $1.2 trillion, that's what the Inflation Reduction Act cost, would only make inflation worse, not better. And even President Biden eventually admitted that the Inflation Reduction Act did absolutely nothing to raise prices. Even President Biden, at the end of his term, admitted that. So where did all the Inflation Reduction Act money go? Fair question for taxpayers to ask. I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting to know what they do with our money. Let me say that again. There's nothing wrong with wanting to know what they do with our money. So where did all the Inflation Reduction Act, this $1.2 trillion, go? Well, President Trump and DOGE, the group appointed by President Trump, and the EPA under new leadership, under Mr. Lee Zeldin, have begun to follow some of that money. Now, this is where Ms. Stacey Abrams comes in. I think it's fair to say that Ms. Abrams is, I don't know, I would call her controversial. She has the right to believe what she believes. This is America. She has the right to free speech. I'm not criticizing that, even though I disagree with some of what she says. But I think it would be fair to describe her as controversial. She's probably best known for the fact that she ran for governor of Georgia twice, and she lost. In her career, Ms. Abrams has said the following. I don't want to just articulate hyperbole here. I want you to read her words, not mine. On April 20th, 2024, Ms. Abrams appeared on MSNBC with Reverend Al Sharpton, and this is what Ms. Abrams said, quote, "What we know is that the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, is an attack on democracy." On September 20th, 2022, during a panel discussion in Atlanta, Ms. Abrams said this about a baby's heartbeat, a fetal heartbeat, the heartbeat of a baby in a mother's womb. This is what Ms. Abrams said about a fetal heartbeat. She said it is, quote, a manufactured sound designed to convince people that men have the right to take control of a woman's body, end quote. My word, her words, not mine. In May of 2022, during a Georgia gubernatorial debate, She's running for governor of Georgia now. Ms. Abrams called Georgia, quote, the worst state in the country to live in. In October of 2022, during another Georgia gubernatorial debate, Ms. Abrams accused the sheriffs, all of the sheriffs in Georgia who endorsed her opponent, Governor Brian Kemp, of wanting, quote, to be able to take black people off the streets. In October of 2022, Ms. Abrams appeared on MSNBC. She suggested that abortion is a solution to inflation. Here's what she said. She said, quote, let's be clear. Having children is why you're worried about your price of gas. It's why you're worried about how much food costs, close quote. Her words, not mine. Let me say again, Ms. Abrams has the right to her opinion. This is America. You're not free if you can't express yourself. But I do think any fair-minded person would have to conclude that Ms. Abrams is controversial. So, in March of 2023, not that long ago, Ms. Abrams went to work for an organization, a nonprofit, called Rewiring America. You've probably seen that name in the news. Rewiring America. Ms. Abrams' title, she went to work for Rewiring America, her title was Senior Counsel. She was paid for her work for Rewiring America. We don't know how much, though there'll probably be an investigation to find out. Now, nonprofits like Rewiring America, Ms. Abrams' group, they have to file documents with the IRS. And one of the documents they have to file is called Form 990. This form by the IRS asks a number of questions about nonprofits. One of the questions the IRS asks is where it is for the organization, the nonprofit, to list its accomplishments. Rewiring America, Ms. Abrams' group, told the IRS in 2023 on this form 990 that Rewiring America was, quote, this was Rewiring America's, quote, startup year for the organization. And the form goes on to say that the only accomplishment Rewiring America listed was that it had, quote, joined a coalition of other national organizations to apply for a grant from the Inflation Reduction Act's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. In other words, Ms. Abrams' organization told the IRS that this filing was their first ever tax filing in 2023, that the organization was a startup, and its purpose was exclusively to seek a grant from President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. Fair enough. So what do we know about this coalition that Ms. Abrams' group wanted to form? Rewiring America, Ms. Abrams' group, announced on October 12, 2023, that it was joining Habitat for Humanity, it was joining United Way Worldwide, and two other organizations. And these four organizations were going to form another nonprofit, a coalition of nonprofits called Power Forward Communities. So you've got Power Forward Communities up here, you've got Rewiring America and some other organizations down here. And altogether, they make up Power Forward Communities. And they also announced that a gentleman by the name of Tim Mayopoulos, a former Obama administration appointee, would lead the coalition. Now, as a nonprofit, I told you that Rewiring America had to file forms with the IRS. Well, so did this new group, Power Forward. It had to file Form 990 as well with the IRS. According to its filings, Power Forward had just $100 in total revenues in 2023. According to the IRS filing, it didn't list a single accomplishment. I've seen Girl Scout troops with more business credentials. Yet Power Forward Communities, of which Ms. Abrams' Rewiring America was a part, had the audacity to ask the federal government for a $2 billion grant. For what, you ask? It was supposed to be for, quote, to expand access to clean energy by prioritizing housing, equity, and resilience. Power Forward Community said it wanted to take this taxpayer money and help people install energy-efficient upgrades to their homes. What are we talking about? Heat pumps. Get rid of gas stoves. Now, it's good to dream big in America. I'm all for that. But under any reasonable standard, Mr. President, under any reasonable standard, one is entitled to ask how these organizations, Ms. Abrams Rewiring America and Power Forward Communities, brand new organizations, no business experience, $100 in the bank, are qualified to receive $2 billion of taxpayer money from the Biden administration. Now, that didn't stop the Biden administration from cutting a check, though. They took our money and gave Power Forward Communities in Rewiring America $2 billion. You want to know how we ran up $36 billion in debt? That's how. Now, the EPA announced in 2024 under President Biden, just 6 months after Power Forward was formed. Power Forward was formed, and 6 months later, President Biden and his team announced they were giving them $2 billion, and that's, as I said, that's B with a billion. Now, look, I try to see the world from other people's bell towers as much as I can. But I cannot come up, not for the life of me, with a single rational justification as to why the EPA under the Biden administration thought it was appropriate to give Power Forward and Rewiring America to brand new nonprofits with no business experience, no accomplishments according to the IRS forms, and only $100 in the bank to give them $2 billion of taxpayer money, especially to the exclusion of every other qualified applicant for that money, if there were any other qualified applicants. We don't know. I don't know. I don't know if there was a competitive bid. Now, I do know that the EPA, under President Biden, gave Ms. Abrams' group, her two groups, $2 billion cash. In the grant approval, President Biden's EPA said that Power Forward had to allocate this money to get rid of stoves and to put in heat pumps. They had to allocate the money. They had to spend it in 21 days. Now, that meant that Ms. Abrams' group, Rewiring America, which was part of the larger group, likely received or was supposed to receive a check for $490 million, about a quarter of the total $2 billion, by the end of May 2024. And the other organizations, within 21 days, President Biden directed, were also supposed to receive their share of the money. But get this. President Biden and his team directed these NGOs to distribute $2 billion in 21 days. But the Biden administration also told Power Forward within 90 days to go take a course. You know what the course was? The name of the course was How to Develop a Budget. How to develop a budget. So, President Biden gave Power Forward 21 days to spend the money, but said, you've got 90 days to go take a course about how to put together a budget. And why would anybody in the Milky Way give $2 billion of taxpayer money to two organizations that had just been formed, that according to the IRS filings had no accomplishments, and one of them only had $100 in the bank. I think I know why. I certainly know what it looks like. I mean, this would be comical if it wasn't so odious. $2 billion. You know, the last 4 years under the last administration have been very difficult for America. The cost of everything's gone up. The cost of many things have gone up by 20%, and our wages didn't keep up. The average electricity bill in America went up 19%. The average Louisianian, because of President Biden's inflation, had to spend an extra $890 a month, extra, for food and clothing and car notes, and they didn't get $890 a month raise. President Biden and my Democratic colleagues told us that the Inflation Reduction Act, I remember when it was passed, they said if you spend $1.2 trillion on the Inflation Reduction Act, it'll be a lifeline to every family in America. It's not what it looks like to me. It's starting to look like to me that it was really a slush fund. A slush fund for Washington insiders. Now, I don't want to make accusations that are unfair. I think EPA Administrator Zeldin needs to get to the bottom of this. I believe in fairness. I believe in due process. Mr. Zeldin has announced that he's going to try to claw back as much of this $2 billion and other monies as he can. And again, I think he ought to do it fairly and accord everybody due process. But you know what? If the shoe fits, wear it, Cinderella. Here's what I see. I see two organizations formed in the last year or so of President Biden's administration. On their IRS filings, they say we have no experience, we have no accomplishments. One of them only has $100 in the bank. One of them, senior counsel, is Ms. Stacey Abrams, a well-known Democratic politician. I see them asking the President of the United States and his EPA for $2 billion cash to fight gas stoves and getting it to the exclusion of every other applicant who might have been able to use that money. Now, this is just the beginning of the type of spending porn that President Trump and Mr. Musk are uncovering, that people are screaming about. I'm going to repeat what I started with. There's nothing wrong with wanting to know what they do and did with our money. And that's all President Trump and Mr. Musk are doing.
Also confirmed that the president just recently got off the phone with President Zelensky of Ukraine. His truth is as follows. I just spoke to President Zelensky of Ukraine. The conversation went very well. He, like President Putin, wants to make peace. We discussed a variety of topics having to do with the war, but mostly the meeting that is being set up on Friday in Munich, where Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will lead the delegation. I am hopeful that the results of that meeting will be positive. It is time to stop this ridiculous war where there has been massive and totally unnecessary death and destruction. God bless the people of Russia and Ukraine. I myself just spoke to the president about these calls, and he told me to tell all of you they were very good calls, they were very positive, and the administration is wholeheartedly committed to a peace deal to end once and for all the Russia-Ukraine war. More on that later. I'm sure you'll have more questions to ask. This week, the president has continued to deliver on his promises to the American people. According to new polling that was released at the beginning of this week by CBS News, an overwhelming 70% of Americans said that President Trump is following through on what he pledged to do during his historic campaign. The poll also revealed that Americans see President Trump as a tough, energetic, focused, and effective leader fighting hard to improve their lives and our country. And yesterday, in particular, was a truly special day for the United States of America. Thanks to the great leadership of President Trump and the strong and tough leadership of President Trump, Mark Fogel, an American teacher detained by Russia, was returned to American soil and met with the president here at the White House last night. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the rest of President Trump's incredible national security team helped negotiate the exchange that secured Mark Fogel's release. This event shows a good faith effort from Russia, and it's a sign, as I just said, that we are moving in the right direction to end this brutal war. Malphine Fogel, Mark's 95-year-old mother, was understandably very worried that she would never see her son again after his arrest in 2021. Mrs. Fogel was actually slated to join President Trump on stage at the July 13th Butler, Pennsylvania rally to speak out for Mark. And then the infamous assassination attempt against President Trump took place. But that day, before the rally, President Trump promised Mark's mother that when he returned to the White House, he would bring her son home. God saved President Trump's life on that day in Butler, Pennsylvania, and now Mark Fogel is back home safely with his family as a result. God is good. The president also continues to bring back common sense to our government. This week, he signed an EO to end the procurement and forced use of paper straws. Taxpayer dollars were wasted on these non-functional and massively unpopular products for no other reason than it made radical activists feel good about themselves. And on trade, President Trump continues to take bold action to protect America's critical steel and aluminum industries, much like he did in his first term. And the president signed proclamations to close existing loopholes and exemptions to restore a true 25% tariff on steel and elevate the tariff on aluminum to 25% as well. This administration believes these tariffs will protect our national security and put American workers first. And in the Oval Office yesterday with Elon Musk, President Trump took further action to make our federal government more efficient and effective. He signed an EO implementing the DOGE Workforce Optimization Initiative. Now agency heads will coordinate and consult with DOGE to significantly shrink the size of the federal workforce and limit hiring to essential positions only. The unaccountable bureaucracy will finally be reined in. On another important matter this morning, Senate Republicans continued to confirm President Trump's exceptionally qualified nominees, most recently Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who will be joining us later at the White House for her swearing-in ceremony. It's imperative that the remainder of the president's cabinet nominees are confirmed as quickly as possible. On another important matter this week, illegal alien criminals continue to be arrested and sent home as part of the ongoing mass deportation effort of the Trump administration. Just this week, 2 planes with 190 Venezuelan illegal aliens arrived in the Venezuelan capital from Fort Bliss, Texas. Here are some of the criminal illegal aliens who were arrested in the country this past week. ICE Atlanta arrested a citizen of Nigeria who had been convicted of money laundering. ICE San Antonio arrested a citizen of Mexico who had been convicted of assault. ICE Denver arrested a citizen of Mexico who had been convicted of aggravated assault. And ICE Houston arrested a citizen of Mexico who had been convicted of aggravated assault. Now, before I take questions, I would like to address an extremely dishonest narrative that we've seen emerging over the past few days. Many outlets in this room have been fear-mongering the American people into believing there is a constitutional crisis taking place here at the White House. I've been hearing those words a lot lately. But in fact, the real constitutional crisis is taking place within our judicial branch, where district court judges in liberal districts across the country are abusing their power to unilaterally block President Trump's basic executive authority. We believe these judges are acting as judicial activists rather than honest arbiters of the law. And they have issued at least 12 injunctions against this administration in the past 14 days, often without citing any evidence or grounds for their lawsuits. This is part of a larger concerted effort by Democrat activists and nothing more than the continuation of the weaponization of justice against President Trump.
Did you know that Amazon has a $50 million fund that they have to pay out every month? And here's how you can get a cut of it. My name is Charlotte Mickelson, and we help everyday people grow their income with this one simple method. And we're pretty darn good at it. Our company, Publishing.com, was named the 19th fastest growing company in America. And the only reason we're so successful is because of the success that we've created for others. And I'll tell you why our method works so much better than anything else you might have tried. It's because starting a business is not the best way for regular people to make more money. And that's what everyone gets wrong. Starting and running a business is hard. It's expensive, it takes a long time, and it requires skills and experience that most people don't have. Instead, we help you plug into Amazon and do $500 billion a year business they've already built. Now, the way we do it is completely different from anything you've seen before. We don't show you how to buy and sell physical products on Amazon like everybody else. The way we plug into Amazon is through this app on our phone called Audible, which most people don't know is one of Amazon's apps. And using this app, I showed my mom how to get paid checks like this from Amazon every month. Look, this didn't make her rich, so if that's what you're looking for, this isn't for you. But if you want extra income stream on top of what you're currently making that pays you every month like clockwork, that we can help you with. So if you want to see how we do it, my husband Christian, who discovered this method, just finished making the best video training he's ever made, walking you through step by step exactly how to set up this Audible app strategy for yourself. And the best part is it's 100% free. There's absolutely no risk in clicking on this video and seeing for yourself how this is working for so many people. So just hit the button on your screen, put in your email, and you'll have instant access to this free training which reveals everything. Steven here says, I'm so glad I didn't skip that YouTube ad because my last check from Audible was life-changing. And here's what others have to say about it.
This past month, I reached $8,000 in revenue, and I'm on track to reach $10,000 in revenue this month.
I've been able to go from 0 to 22K in 7 months. And of course, this completely changed my life.
I do this on a part-time basis, about 5 to 10 hours a week. I earn about $40,000 a year. There's no other job that pays with that little time.
So, to get free access to the training, all you need to do is tap the button on your screen, put in your email, and you can watch it right away. And look, if you're skeptical that what I'm sharing here is BS, or you think that those were paid actors, whatever you're thinking, that's fine. I get it. But that's exactly why we put together this free training for you, so that you can see for yourself what it's all about first. So you can see how it works, exactly how we do it, completely for free. Now, we wouldn't be the 19th fastest growing company in America if our stuff wasn't good. So the most important thing that you can do right now is don't waste any more time. Hit the link, go through the free training, see our 3-step process to making money with Audible, and get results. So again, my name is Charlotte Mickelson, and I'll see you on the training.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ron Paul. If you are within 20 years of retirement, or if you are already retired, all of your hard-earned savings now could be in danger. Why? Because from 2020 to 2024, the left constructed an economic time bomb by printing trillions of dollars. Now that money is slowly making its way into our economy. And that means if you do nothing, inflation will continue to devour your savings. If this concerns you, I strongly recommend physical gold for your retirement account. Throughout history, gold has maintained its value while paper currencies became worthless. With a gold IRA from Birch Gold Group, you pay no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current IRA or 401k. To learn more, click the link below and my friends at Birch Gold Group will send you a free info kit on gold IRAs. Birch Gold is the only gold company I trust. Click the link below to request your free info kit on gold IRAs right now.
Quick news flash to these liberal judges who are supporting their obstructionist efforts. 77 million Americans voted to elect this president. And each injunction is an abuse of the rule of law and an attempt to thwart the will of the people. As the president clearly stated in the Oval Office yesterday, we will comply with the law in the courts, but we will also continue to seek every legal remedy to ultimately overturn these radical injunctions and ensure President Trump's policies can be enacted. So here in our new media seat today, we have Chris Pavlovsky, an entrepreneur who has a strong passion for protecting freedom of speech. Chris started the video sharing platform Rumble in 2013 with a mission of protecting a free and open internet from censorship by big tech and governments around the globe. The platform has always been a place for independent creators to share their authentic opinions, and they have always included President Trump, in contrast to the way he was censored by other platforms in years past. Since its founding, Rumble has grown exponentially, recently marking 67 million monthly active users. It's a lot of users. If you're watching right now and interested in sitting in this seat, you can apply, whitehouse.gov/newmedia. With that, I will take your questions. And Chris, why don't you kick us off on this very busy news day?
Carolyn, thank you very much to you and President Trump. It's an honor to be sitting here in the new media seat for the White House press briefing and to be able to demonstrate why freedom of expression is so important. Rumble was the victim of censorship at the hands of multiple foreign governments. It's clear there are still many countries who oppose free speech and even target American companies. Can you describe what the administration will do to protect U.S. interests and values worldwide?
Sure. Well, thanks for the very important question. And I think that free speech and ending censorship, both here at home and also abroad, is an important part of President Trump's agenda. I think first, President Trump has led by example on this front as the leader of the free world, the president of the United States, with his show of access and transparency on a daily basis. The president takes questions from all of you almost every single day and really reveals what he's thinking and feeling, and I think that serves as a great example to the rest of the world. As for tangible actions that the president has signed, he did sign an executive order, I believe on day one, certainly within the first week of this administration, to restore free speech and stop government-sponsored censorship here at home. And the EO made it very clear that federal employees are not allowed to engage in any activity that would infringe upon the American people's right of free expression. So I think the president has led quite strongly on this. And I would just add, this is part of the reason we have a new media seat, to invite new voices into this room. Again, we're going to need to expand this room because so many people are interested, and we're very excited about that. It's a privilege to cover this White House, but we want all voices to be heard. So thanks for being us with here, Chris, and I hope you enjoy the briefing. Sure. Jordan.
Thanks, Caroline. Data out this morning showed that consumer prices were up across a variety of goods. And just before that report, though, President Trump.
At Build with Ferguson, we know when it comes to your business, time is money. That's why you can count on us for all your home improvement needs. Build with Ferguson carries the broadest selection of products with unbeatable pro pricing, everything your clients want, and everything to help you with your bottom line. Your dedicated account rep can help with everything from finding the right products to coordinating delivery times. Plus, get the product shipped fast and free to your job site. What you need, when you need it. Visit build.com and see for yourself. Sign up for a pro account today.
Their homes, their health, their hope, it's all at stake. Washington's uncertainty is bringing New Yorkers pain. Threatened Medicaid cuts will devastate our loved ones' lives. If Congress gets their way, it's lights out for nursing homes here in the Hudson Valley. But it doesn't have to be that way. There's still time. Congressman Mike Lawler can stand with seniors. Stop these cuts. Save our seniors. Keep the lights on. Congressman Lawler, stand with us, because Medicaid cuts never heal.
Called for lower interest rates. The Fed said it's holding rates steady to try and tamp down further inflation. So how would lowering rates help keep inflation in check for the American people?
Sure. Well, first of all, on the inflation point, we did receive those numbers, and they were worse than expected, which tells us that the Biden administration indeed left us with a mess to deal with. It's far worse than I think anybody anticipated because, unfortunately, the previous administration was not transparent in where the economy truly was. We know people at this very podium told the American people that inflation was transitory and that it would go away. That was not the case. And now the last report of the Biden administration, as revealed today, shows that inflation is still about 4.5% higher over the past 3 months. This is an indictment on the Biden administration's mismanagement of the inflation crisis and their lack of transparency in addressing it. As for tackling inflation and interest rates, the president has made his position on this very clear. He wants interest rates to be lower, he wants inflation to be lower, and he believes that the whole of government economic approach that this administration is taking will result in lower inflation. I have said that from this podium many times. The president had record low interest rates and inflation rates in his first term. He believes that the economy can handle it and withstand it, and we're doing a lot to tackle the inflation effort on this front. It's a whole of government economic approach, and I've talked about what we're doing to tackle inflation quite a few times from this podium.
Reciprocal tariffs, that's going to come before Prime Minister Modi's visit tomorrow.
I do believe it will come before the Prime Minister's visit tomorrow, and I will let the President discuss the details on the reciprocal tariff front, but this is something he believes strongly in, and it's very simple logic as to why the President wants to impose reciprocal tariffs. It's the golden rule, which we all learned when we were growing up in school. Treat others the way you want to be treated, and far too many nations around this world have been ripping off the United States of America for far too long, and that's why the President believes this will be a great policy that will benefit American workers and improve our national security. JJ.
On Doge and the fraud claims, Elon Musk in the Oval yesterday gave us some information on that. We're just wondering if there's some proof, evidence. Is the White House willing to share evidence of those fraud claims, or can Elon Musk come to the briefing room and share material evidence of what he's talking about?
Sure, I would love for Elon Musk to come to the briefing room. That's why we had him go to the Oval Office yesterday, where I think he provided great answers. He was speaking in layman's terms, speaking common sense to all of you in the media, but also to Americans at home. But I would say especially to all of you in the media, because I think it's a real fallacy that there's this alleged lack of transparency when it comes to Doge. President Trump and Elon Musk have been incredibly transparent on what Doge is doing. There is an X account with the Doge handle. They are tweeting out what they are doing on a daily basis. They have a website where they are posting the receipts of the contracts that they are reviewing and the payments that they have stopped from going out the door. The secretaries of our departments have stopped from going out the door. And I would also say that before it was Elon Musk making our government efficient and accountable, it was some unnamed bureaucrat that none of you knew. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. He's also now one of the most highly scrutinized men in the world alongside President Trump because of what he's doing and the access that he is allowing. So there's great transparency. As for the actual receipts, we are happy to provide them, and I actually brought some today because all of you know I love to bring the receipts. We have contracts upon contracts that we can send and provide this information to you. Let me be very clear. We are not trying to hide anything. We have been incredibly transparent, and we will continue to be. These are screenshots of contracts that Doge found across our government. This is a DEI contract, $36,000 for U.S. citizenship and immigration services. That is against the president's policies and his America First agenda. This is a $3.4 million contract, a Council for Inclusive Innovation at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, Department of Commerce, another DEI contract that Doge identified. I can continue to go through these. Oh, I love this one, $57,000 for climate change in Sri Lanka. What is this doing to continue the interests of the American people? Absolutely nothing. These are the line items across the federal government that Doge is identifying daily. They're moving very fast. There's a lot of paper that we can show you, but we're happy to do it. This administration has been more than transparent about what Doge is doing. And here's one of their tweets that they posted about the mine. I believe this is in Pennsylvania, where the federal employee retirement system is being processed. Did anybody know this was even happening in our country before Elon Musk talked about it in the Oval Office yesterday? A lot of Americans didn't. So we are providing transparency and accessibility on a daily basis when it comes to Doge. And I also have a Doge daily report, if anybody would like it, on all of the things that they are identifying and finding. We're happy to provide this information to you. We're talking about it every single day.
Are all those things you just mentioned fraud, or are they waste, or are they just contrary to the president's policies?
I would argue that all of these things are fraudulent, they are wasteful, and they are an abuse of the American taxpayer's dollar. This is not what the government should be spending money on. It's contrary to the president's priorities and agenda. And again, we can continue to provide you the receipts for all of the fraud, waste, and abuse. And if anybody in here wants to argue that the federal government is not fraudulent in some capacity, be my guest, because I think the American people watching at home would beg to differ.
Caroline?
Mary.
Hey, more on the judges. Does the White House believe the courts have the authority to issue these nationwide injunctions?
We believe that the injunctions that have been issued by these judges have no basis in the law and have no grounds, and we will, again, as the president said very clearly yesterday, comply with these orders, but it is the administration's position that we will ultimately be vindicated, and the president's executive actions that he took were completely within the law, they were constitutional, and we look forward to the day where he can continue to implement his agenda. And I would just add, it's our view that this is the continuation of the weaponization of justice that we have seen against President Trump. He fought it for 2 years on the campaign trail. It won't stop him now. Brian.
Yes. I want to go back to Doge just for a second. Earlier, the subcommittee headed by Chairman Marjorie Taylor Greene, her and her staff discovered $2.7 trillion in improper payments to Medicare, Medicaid, overseas, to people who should not have gotten it. Some of this room might have missed that press conference. Can you elaborate on what the president is thinking at this point?
Well, again, that's another example. There's a very long list of the fraud, waste, and abuse that Doge is identifying on a daily basis.
Elon Musk also talked about yesterday about Social Security payments that are going out the door for people who are no longer with us, unfortunately. I would say that is certainly